Good evening, everybody. This is Marty from Dawgs Blog with tonight's podcast from Friday, January 18th, 2019. Just a quick note, Tom was in court yesterday and today, and his reports are, he's got some things going on. He's going to be out of town for the next couple of days, so he's going to try to get his reports to me Sunday, if we can get them this weekend or Monday at the latest. So just letting you know his reports will be coming forward, just not able to get them up right now, but he has been in court. The afternoon session started with the judge on the bench around 1:33, so we've been doing pretty good for the most part, except for a day here and there. Judge Aniga looked at, if you listen to the noon report, Marlissa had made some citations in prelim testimony and some other things about Woody saying what kind of driving on pavement or dirt or whatever going up when they went to the mountains allegedly to dispose of the body. So Judge looked at those portions cited by Marlissa Ferreira in regards to parking on asphalt, and Marlissa Ferreira tried to explain how it misstates the evidence when Hans was talking about the type of roadway that was on there, and she said that Robert Woody said two things during the interviews. One, it was partially asphalt and dirt, and something else. I forget exactly what it was. Judge just looked at her and says, "I disagree," and called for the jury to come up. Jury was up at 1:42. We haven't been doing too bad with the jury this week. We had Wednesday. It was kind of short in the morning, but it's a little better. And Attorney Hans was still doing his cross-examination on Robert Woody. They were talking about, if you remember where they ended up, they were talking about the fire that Woody had started in the Pop and Cork lot the next day after they allegedly took the body up to the mountain, and he said that he put the fire out. He let it burn for about 3 minutes, and then he put the fire out with water, so not everything was burned. So he started a fire to burn the evidence and then didn't let the evidence burn completely. This is the line of thinking that we've got going here. Hans asked him if there's no other way that he put the fire out, like stepping on it. And Woody said no. And so he pulled out the preliminary transcript from September 29, 2016. And if you want to go to that date on my site, you can go to the sidebar. On the right, if you're on a computer, it's at the bottom. If you scroll down, it's in the blue on the bottom, and you'll see dates, months, and then dates that you can go to. And if you want to look up some of our reports from these dates, you can do that from the preliminary hearing. They're all there. And Woody testified in the prelim that he stamped out the fire when it started making too much smoke and drawing attention. And, this is what Hans read to him. And he goes, yeah. This is how the answers have been going. Because he's kind of caught in some of these stories that he told. And he goes, oh, yeah, something like that. He says the rags didn't burn all the way due to stomping out the fire. That was his testimony in the prelim, and now he's saying he poured water on it. He talked about Steve Jacobson interview in October of 2015. It was at the DA's office. He was talking about a minute order and some other documents. And he was kind of confused by the term minute order, but he finally figured out they were talking about what they call the minute order after a court date. And other documents that Steve Jacobs said there will be an argument between attorneys and Marlissa Ferreira about whatever was on that minute order. I didn't really get it. So But he asked him if Robert Woody was trying to get a deal or resolve his case. Woody again goes, huh? When you throw words like resolve at him, he doesn't know what you're talking about. Marlissa Ferreira was there in that interview. And he said, Woody did say that he wasn't trying to please anybody. Hans was asking if that's what he was trying to do, because he made some comments about that to family and such. At the end of the interview, he had told Steve Jacobson that he feels that Jacobson is not pleased. It was important to him that he pleased Steve Jacobson for some reason. That's noted in some phone calls and other things that he said. Robert Woody said something to the effect that you guys are still not getting enough. And Hans is asking him, enough what? When Hans read that, Woody says, yeah. And Woody said he's not trying to please Steve Jacobson. Martin Baker had told there was two attorneys with Woody on this, Martin Baker and Bruce Perry. And Martin Baker had told Robert Woody that he is meeting with Marlissa Ferreira. Martin Baker is meeting with Marlissa Ferreira to find out what will happen. And Woody responded to that by saying, yeah. And Martin Baker said that he will be out to see him at the jail, maybe with some good news. So Hans is asking him, again, it sounds like you're trying to get a deal. He asked Robert Woody if he understand the attorney was trying to get a deal for him, and Woody says, well, I don't recall. He did plea out on August 3rd, 2016. That's actually when the plea agreement was made, and he pled out in court, in a separate court from Judge Zuniga's court. And he's been waiting since October of 2015 for that good news. So October 2015 is when Martin Baker talked about him having good news, hopefully. And in August of 2016 is when he got his deal, his plea agreement, whatever you want to call it. He said from October of 2015 to July of 2016, and remember, July is when that infamous interview is, where he was still putting Walter Wells and Frank Carson at the scene of what he says is where the crime occurred on Frank Carson's property. But in April of 2016, Robert Woody had told his attorney that Frank Carson and Walter Wells were not there. So 3 months later, he's telling investigators that they were there, and Walter Wells, Woody was walking out, and Walter Wells, he says, made him go back in to clean up the mess. Then shortly after, and this was done because of the testimony that Beverly Woody had given in the preliminary hearing, which sounds suspiciously like perjured testimony. So he had made this story after Beverly Woody had gone to the jail. I'm just giving you a little history here. Beverly Woody had gone to the jail, visited Robert Woody saying, hi, I love you, how are you? If you want to get out of jail, this is what you need to say, and held up a piece of paper to the window that told him what he needed to say. And that said that Frank Carson and Walter Wells, he needed to say that they were at the scene. This is what investigators want. How did Beverly Woody know that? Well, your guess is as good as mine, but I think we can figure it out. But she was telling him what to say to get his deal, and that's what he did. In July 22nd, 2016, that's the first time he ever mentioned Walter Wells and Frank Carson. Then a few days later, he recanted because it wasn't working for him. And that was brought out during a phone call that he had made to his family that he needed to change his story. His attorney told him if he needed to get a deal, he needed to change his story. So so that's a little bit of history. So he told them, and 3 months later, after telling his attorney in a statement, no, they weren't there. In July 22nd, 2016, he's saying Walter Wells and Frank Carson were there. There's a lie in there somewhere. I think we know which one it is. He had never said anything to that effect in any prior interviews. In July of 2016, Martin Baker had contacted Marlissa Ferreira to talk, and Woody went in and talked for Marlissa Ferreira and Steve Jacobson, and that's when he told him the story about Walter Wells and Frank Carson were on the property that night, and Walter Wells sent him back in to clean up the mess that Woody had been saying that he walked away from once he started talking, after denying it so many times and started talking, and then said he wasn't actually there when the shooting occurred. He also said that Robin Attenhofer, which was his girlfriend at the time, she has since passed away, was with him, had gone over there with him in Daljeet Atwell's car. She was sitting in the back seat over to Frank Carson's property when they got that call that doesn't show up on the cell phone records anywhere. He said he was at home. He got a call from Dee, and he had gone over to the Carson property with Daljeet Atwell, which is morphed into a different statement later on. He said that Walter Wells was there when they arrived. This is what he was saying in July 22nd, 2016. Again, Robin Attenhofer was in the back seat of the BMW. On March 1st of 2014, he said that he never saw a weapon in anybody's hand. That story changed. In 8/14 of 2015, he told Jacobson and Sergeant Dombey of the CHP that there was no gun. He didn't see a gun. That story changed. On 8/15 of 2015, when they did the walkthrough of the alleged crime scenes, Frank Carson's property, Poppencork property, and in the mountains where the body was recovered, Steve Jacobson asked again, and Woody said he saw no gun. And in an interview on 10/6 of 2014, he said he never saw a gun. And I don't remember, I think that was with a CHP investigator, but I'm not sure who that was in October of 2015. In July 22nd, 2016, was the first time he said there was a gun. And he said Frank Carson had taken the gun from Daljeet Atwell and disposed of it or whatever he did with it. That was the first time that story has been told, and that was after the Beverly Woody visit to the jail. He said he did not recall when the first time he mentioned about the gun. Read some transcripts, and then on July 22nd, 2016, the interview with Steve Jacobson Steve Jacobson asked him why didn't he mention the gun previously, and he didn't have an answer for that. He just said Dee had the gun and shot Corey Kaufman. In the preliminary hearing testimony in September of 2016, he said the first time he told them about the gun was in July of 2016 interview. Robert Woody had been asked numerous times previously. He never said there was a gun. They were just kind of going over and over in this thing. This is what's in my notes, and this is kind of how it went. They were just, Hans was just going over and over it. Hans asked him if that July 2016 statement was based on Beverly Woody's paper at the jail. The information she gave him, holding up the paper to the window. And he didn't recall, but he was trying to set things straight and correct things after he came back later and changed his story. It was just like a day or two or three later after he had made there was a jail call to his mom telling her that he needed to change his story. He was asked why he had been holding back. He said at this point he just wanted to come to an end. He wanted to get it over with. Robert Woody said he wasn't working towards a deal. He really didn't want a deal. That's kind of hard to believe, and he said he wasn't concerned about trying to please Steve Jacobson. There was, in that same phone call that I just referred to his family at home, it was Beverly and Woodrow, if I remember correctly, his son Woodrow, that he told them they want me to say certain things, and he was told by his family, do what you got to do to get your deal. He told investigators again on July 22nd, 2016, that Walter Wells had told him to go back and clean up the mess. He changed his story. I call it a recant. A couple of days later. Robert Woody said that he was just following orders when he was told to go back, and due to him being scared, he didn't know what else to do. He was also asked about Martin Baker on July 25th, 2016. 3 days later, after this interview, his attorney came to visit at the jail with his private investigator. Martin Baker asked, I believe it was Martin Baker, that asked him if his last interview, which Baker was at, was the truthful. And there was a lot of objections during all of this. Marlissa Ferreira was objecting to 70 to 80% of the questions asked as Hans was asking these questions, because Woody was getting hammered on all these stories, and they were overruled on 99% of them. In fact, the judge was starting to get a little bit irritated with it, but she doesn't do anything about it anyway. But he didn't recall what he said when he was asked by his attorney if that interview was truthful. Robert Woody said, though, he did just want it to be done, over with. He said that he didn't say that the DA would give him a testimonial agreement or not. He said he wasn't sure. He did not recall if that's what he had said or talked about. And it was at the end of the interview where he said that Walter Wells was there in a silver, what he called a beater car, and told him to get back in the property and clean up the mess. He also told the attorney that Robin Attenhofer was there at Frank Carson property. And he had told the attorney he's not sure if Frank Carson was there or not. So the story just keeps changing and keeps morphing. Who knows what the truth is here. He then later told the attorney that Walter Wells, Robin Attenhofer, Frank Carson were not there. And Hans asked him, were you going back and forth on the information that he was giving? And Robert Woody kind of said it's not fair to be saying that. And he said it also wasn't kind of fair for him to say about Frank Carson because he wasn't actually there. It really got confusing in parts of this. On July 26th of 2016, Martin Baker and Bruce Perry visited Woody at the jail. Both attorneys went. He said, yeah, they were there. He called his mom later that day and told her to get a hold of Steve Jacobson as he was losing his credibility, quote unquote. I have heard this phone call in the prelim. He said he was going to lose his deal if he didn't change his story. So it appears that it was a possibility, or at least has the appearances, that his attorneys were telling him to change his story. He told his mom that he had too many problems, and they were starting to blow out his ass, something to that effect, and I really didn't know what he meant by that. But the too many stories coming out his ass, I believe, is what he was referring to. He has also described some of the conversations with Scott McFarland's neighbors. He had mentioned that the neighbors of Scott McFarland, which was Corey Kaufman and Kevin Pickett family, and now he's saying that some of those conversations occurred prior to Corey Kaufman's missing person date and what they allege is a homicide. But at the time, he said all those conversations with Scott McFarland talking about his neighbors, meaning Corey Kaufman and Kevin Pickett, all occurred after the alleged homicide, missing person and homicide occurred. Now Robert Woody again is saying before and after Corey Kaufman went missing. Hans says, impeaching, Your Honor, meaning that he's about to read something into the record, and was reading a transcript that Scott McFarland had talked about Corey Kaufman. This was at Pop and Cork in some conversations, and Woody had testified previously, I believe it was in the prelim, but it could have been in one of the interviews, that he had talked, Scott McFarland had talked about Corey Kaufman after Corey Kaufman went missing. Hans asked him about your ass is grass comment and seeing Kim Stout on the street on South Johnson Street where Corey Kaufman lived at the time. He said he was sitting in the front passenger seat. He saw Kim Stout. He only saw her and went by her one time. He said every time he sees her, he whistles at her. And while he was moving down the street, he said he was about 8 houses away from the Corey Kaufman residence when he saw Kim Stout. That's what he testified in the prelim, and now he's saying that he was just a couple of houses away from Kaufman's house when he saw Kim Stout. So again, Hans impeached his testimony with his previous testimony. Marissa Ferreira had made an objection at that time. Most of her objections were misstates the evidence or foundation. The judge doesn't understand half of them, and she's overruling probably 99% of Marissa's objections have been overruled. They end up in a sidebar on that one for some reason because the judge didn't understand it, and then she overruled it when they came back from the sidebar. In the prelim, he had talked about Kim Stout on South Johnson Street, and Marissa Ferreira had asked him about talking to Corey Kaufman and then seeing Kim Stout. Marissa Ferreira asked how far away was Kim Stout from the Corey Kaufman house, and in the prelim, again, he said it was 8 houses. I'm just going down with the notes. They kind of get repetitive sometimes, I realize that. But it might help you get a picture of what's going on here, especially if you're new to some of this information. So, Woody was saying they went by the Kaufman residence, told him his ass is grass, he better stay away from Carson property or whatever you told him, because Kaufman was ripping people off. And while when he pulled up to Corey Kaufman's house, Corey Kaufman was actually helping a neighbor remove a tree stump. He says, correct. The tree was, he asked him where the tree was. Well, he says, kind of in the middle of a yard. I don't know where the house was. So on Google Maps, you can go look up, but I don't know the address. But you can look up and see, and I didn't notice any differences from 2012 to now. One was in March of 2012 of where a tree stump was left or a tree had been pulled out or whatever. So whatever that means, I don't know. He was asked if he got that tree stump information from a police report. He did not recall. In an October 2016 transcript from the prelim, Hans asked him if he testified that he read a report or a private investigator had told him what the neighbors had said. He didn't recall. He said that Corey Kaufman was working on tree stump, and apparently that's what one of the neighbors or somebody made a statement to that effect. So that's what Hans is saying. That's the story that Woody went with. In October of 2016, he had told Steve Jacobson what the neighbors said. He didn't recall. Again, a reviewing transcript. And he says it really didn't help him. He said what the neighbors said. He did not recall what he was basing it on. So he didn't have independent recollection. And that's kind of what it's all about, is independent recollection. You can review a transcript or something. If it doesn't remind you of why you said something or whatever, then there's no further, can't go any further. He said that Woody and Daljeet Atwal had stayed in the vehicle. He just yelled your ass is grass out the window. The hole he dug at the burial site at Poppencork, he said, was 2 to 2.5 feet deep. He used a metal shovel, and it took him 10 minutes. He did not contact another metal object, meaning that when you're digging with a metal shovel, of course, and you hit something, in this case, there was a pipe that went through what they're calling the gravesite at Poppencork. The Department of Justice people that dug up that site, and they could only go down about 14 inches. It was too hard, and they dug all day. And they said there wasn't a hole any deeper than that. Woody said they went down about 2.5 feet. He didn't contact any pipe. There's a gas line that ran through the middle of that hole. And you can see it in the pictures from the DOJ. There's a metal pipe running through that hole. It's a gas line that runs to the house, or to the store. He says he has hit metal objects in the past when digging. He knows the sound that it makes and the response, the report, whatever you want to call it, from the shovel. But he says that didn't happen when he was digging this. He never contacted any metal. But there, like I said, there was a big hole that was a pipe that was running through that hole. He said it was not his call to move the body in the first place from Poppencork to the mountains, but he says they were worried about the cops, and they being the Atwals, because he said that the cops were coming around and doing interviews. Hold on. I just got a message. Let me see if it's... Okay. They moved the body after about 20 days after the body was put in the ground when it came back from the Carson property, due to law enforcement officers coming around to Poppencork and asking questions in regards to Corey Kaufman. He told lies to Kurt Bunch. And when the quest of investigators started coming around and asking about Corey Kaufman and such, that's when he said the Atwals decided to take the body to Mariposa County, which was just a random spot they went and dropped the body off. It just happened to be close to Jason Armstrong campground and Bobby Tickner's marijuana grow. Apparently, it was just a huge coincidence. There's 500,000 acres in the mountains up there in the Stanislaus National Forest. I did look it up, and they put it that close, within 100 yards of some people that are involved in this case. I'm not saying they're involved. I'm just saying there's some people that their names have come up and stuff, and I think there goes to Mike Cooley more than anything else. So just my opinion, whatever that's worth. So he has asked, Hans asked him if he told lies to Kurt Bunch, if he told lies to Marlissa Ferreira, if he lied to Steve Jacobson. Hans asked him if he lied to John Evers. He asked him if he lied to his parents in jail calls. He asked him if he lied to Bruce Perry, if he lied to Martin Baker, which are both of those were his attorneys, if he lied to his private investigator, which was the first one I believe his name was Fanner or something to that effect, and the second one was his name, I believe it was Hilton. He was asked if he lied to investigator Jefferson. He was asked if he lied to Ken Berenger, asked if he lied to Sergeant Dombey from the CHP, and he said yes to all of those. And then he was asked if he lied in court, and he says no, absolutely not. So even though his stories are different from the prelim to the trial. Hans had no further questions. Hans was finally done. It was kind of a grind that he had to do to go through all this information. We took a break. We were out about 25 minutes or so. We came back in, and Jai Gohel was starting in on his cross-examination of Woody. I noticed looking at Woody, I noticed a little bit of change in his demeanor. He was actually smiling and kind of cracking up a little bit. He actually seemed relieved that Hans was done. Whatever that's worth, I don't know. He was starting to crack up a little bit, and then Jai Gohel kind of sobered him up a little bit with some of his questions. Jai Gohel asked him, can you remember all the lies that you told? Objection. Have you told a lot of lies? Yes. Can you remember, or are you able to remember all the lies? And he said no, he's not able to remember all the lies. Prior to the Corey Kaufman case, has he ever lied to law enforcement before? Robert Woody got a funny, confused look on his face that he gets if you don't ask a question real simply. Well, yeah, somebody just said it was Brad Fanner was the investigator. I thought that's what I said. If not, it was Brad Fanner. Yeah, Brad Fanner. I thought that's what I said. He was the first one, and Hilton was the second one. Anyway, yeah, I appreciate that. If I didn't say that, it was Fanner. But he can't remember all the lies. Again, Robert Woody was looking confused when he asked him if he ever lied before. And he asked when he was stopped in a stolen car that his brother was driving. That's a case that Frank Carson represented him on and got dismissed. Actually, Woody was charged in possession of stolen property because he didn't actually steal the car. His brother did. And by the way, his brother's in custody now for the same thing. He didn't recall when he was stopped or if he lied, but he said he didn't have anything to do with it, apparently, is what Jai Gohel was getting to, because he went to the preliminary hearing transcript to refresh. And Woody is not just reading the lines that the attorneys want him to read. he wants to read the whole page or something like that. And he just flat out said, I'm going to read the whole page. And they're saying, fine, go ahead. And so it's taken him long. Actually, I think he knows how to read fairly well. He's slow in his reading. And I don't think, you can't blame him for that. It is what it is. So it takes him a few minutes to go through a page or two of transcript. He was asked if he lied before in some of the other legal issues he's had to get out of trouble. And he said, well, yeah, I guess I have. And he's had contact. Jai Gohil asked him if he's had contact with his family all along while he's been in custody and prior to going into custody. And then he started asking about, he has told many stories to his family, and he's talking about some of the jail calls that were made, where some of the stories that Woody told constantly changed, and then he finally said, I'm going to have to change my story to get my deal. And he's losing credibility. He's worried about Steve Jacobson's credibility. That's what's said in that jail call. Jai Gohil asked him if he lied many times. In this case, to Marlissa Ferreira, he even lied to his own private investigators. He lied to Miranda Dykes in the body wire. When he claimed that he actually did the homicide by himself. He killed Corey Coffin by himself. This is in February of 2014 that the body wire was worn by Miranda Dykes. He said that he had cut up the body, fed it to the pigs so there wouldn't be anything left. He burned the hair so there wouldn't be any DNA, pulled his teeth so they wouldn't be able to do any type of dental identification. He was trying to get, he admitted that he was trying to get Miranda Dykes to believe him. And he talked about, Jai asked him about the October 5th, 2016 prelim date that he testified, 18 to 20 court days that he was on the stand, and he talked about that he had lied to Miranda Dykes. And some of the things he said there. And some of the things he's saying now. He said the reason was he was trying to get Miranda Dykes to believe him with very intricate details of what he did. My personal opinion, whatever it's worth, I think he was simply trying to get into her pants. I think that's how he thought he could impress her and get her where he wanted her. He said the story was a lie, but it was based on the talk on the streets and what was being said around. So he heard all these things, so he based a lot of what he said on the street talk. In the March 1st of 2014, that was the first interview he did after being taken into custody. He was actually taken into custody on the last day of February, but the interview went in overnight, late into the night, I should say, so it was actually done on March 1st, 2014, and he lied many times. He denied a lot of things in that interview. And that interview was Kurt Bunch and John Evers. I started counting the objections as they were coming on every other question, and Marlissa does it to try to disrupt the flow that the attorneys are on. It doesn't really affect Hans because he was in a zone, but Jai Gohil will just keep going, and it really drives Marlissa Ferrer crazy. So he was asked, Jai Gohil asked him if one of the lies that he said to investigators was to look at Scott McFarlane for the homicide. because of the statements that McFarland made about Corey Kaufman. But he knew that it was from the... he knew it was a lie based on his preliminary hearing testimony. He admitted he knew that was a lie. He wasn't sure now, but he refreshed it. And he also had said that the Atwells, this is back in March of 2014, that the Atwells eventually it got into this, that the Atwells had paid somebody to kill Corey Kaufman, and he said that was a lie. On the July 22nd, 2016 interview with Marlisa Ferreira and Steve Jacobson, he had brought up Walter Wells and Frank Carson were at the property. They were at the scene, which was another lie. He also said that Frank Carson had taken the gun from Daljeet Atwell after the shooting. That was a lie. He then, he said that he actually withdrew that statement because he said it just wasn't right. It wasn't the right thing to do. But he told that story on July 22nd, 2016 to Marlisa Ferrer and Steve Jacobson, knowing full well that was a lie. Remember, 3 months earlier, he made a statement to his attorney, Martin Baker, at the jail with a private investigator that was recorded. I have a copy of it on my site that says that they were not there. Frank Carson and Walter Wells were not there. But he told Marlisa Ferreira 3 months later, knowing full well it was a lie, and his attorney apparently, I guess, let him do it. I don't know. One statement he made, that he was about 100 feet away. He saw the altercation. He said he turned around and started walking away. He wanted no part of it. He was actually out of view of the altercation, I believe is what he said. And he heard a shot, and he went directly home. He didn't want any part of this. He just left the Frank Carson property. Of course, that was a lie. Or what he changed it to was a lie, or everything's a lie. Whatever. Marlisa Ferreira was continually objecting to everything. I could see her frustration building. They went to a sidebar on one of the objections. Marlisa Ferreira looked a little exasperated. I don't know how else to describe it. And she said something that I could tell the judge didn't appreciate. And the judge, in her way, waved her hand and just said, go back. Go back to your table. She didn't want to hear it. Whatever it was, the judge wasn't pleased. Judge doesn't like conflict at all. She didn't know how to deal with it at all. And so at that point, it was already after 4 o'clock, and the jury was sent home. They were done for the day. So the jury was sent out. Robert Woody was sent out. The jury's coming back at 10 a.m. Tuesday because they have whatever this issue is with Marlisa Ferreira. The attorneys are coming back at 9 a.m. Tuesday, and the judge said that she's going to hear whatever, quote unquote, whatever Miss Ferreira's issues are. She will hear them Tuesday morning. So that's where we ended up. The judge just wanted to be done for the day. On Friday, she's pretty much burnt out, and she's not happy in the afternoon because people get tired, and there starts being conflict and stuff like that going on in the room. So that was it. I want to repeat, if anybody has any questions, any observations, or anything, send me an email. The email address is on the site. Make contact. Send me a message on Facebook. Whatever you want to do. Let me know what you're thinking, what your observation is, any questions you have, because I'm sure if you have a question, and sometimes I'm sure I'm not real clear about everything, let me know, because somebody else might be thinking the same thing. And there's been a lot of new people that have come on board following this case in the last month or two, and they probably need to get up to speed. And all the reports are on the website if you want to search back a little bit, and somebody has been doing that. Several people have been doing that, I noticed. So that's good. Inform yourself. Remember, I have a PayPal donation button at the bottom of the site, or each post, and you can donate through PayPal. They're in $5 increments. You just change the amount from 5, 10, 15, 20, whatever you want to donate. $5 is fine. I'm just trying to pay the bills. That's all I'm trying to do, cover costs here with all the things that are involved in this. I'm not looking to make money off it. Just want to pay the bills. So the donate button is there. Don't forget my sponsor, Merced Tile Supply. Real good guy. He knows what he's doing. He knows what he's talking about tile. I've talked to him about it. Some of the stuff. He used to install tile. He used to work with it for 30, 40 years, and now he's just selling supplies and the tile and all the other accessories you need to install tile, or have a contractor go through there. So keep that in mind. That is all I've got. And remember what I always say. I'd like to see more people show up in court and see what's going on. I think it's important that people spread the word a little bit, get the information out. So don't take my word for it. As I always say, don't take my word for it. Come to court and find out for yourself. Good night, everybody. See you Tuesday.